"Shut up and hand over all company property." The words echoed through the conference room like a gunshot. Constance Hartwell stood at the head of the table, her designer handbag clutched in one hand, pointing at me with the other like I was something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. Every single person in that room, my colleagues, the interns, even the IT guy who'd just come to fix the projector, froze. 23 pairs of eyes locked onto me. This wasn't just a termination. This was a public execution. I'd walked into that meeting thinking it was about the Riverside campaign. Instead, I walked into an ambush orchestrated by my boss's mother, a woman who had exactly zero official capacity at Hartwell Digital Solutions, but acted like she owned the place. Technically, her son Wesley did, but Constance had been pulling strings from the shadows since the company's inception. Welcome to the Payback Office channel, where workplace karma isn't just wishful thinking, it's documented, dissected, and delivered. The corporate world has its winners and losers, but sometimes the game changes when someone rewrites the rules entirely. If stories about professional justice and standing up to workplace tyranny resonate with you, hitting that subscribe button helps us build a community that believes accountability matters. We're on our way to 8,000 subscribers, and every person who joins this journey sends a message that these stories need to be heard. The notification bell means you'll catch every update as we share them. My name is Amara Sinclair, and until that Thursday afternoon in October, I was the Director of Digital Strategy at Hartwell Digital Solutions. I'd built campaigns that tripled client retention and personally secured contracts worth over $4 million in annual revenue. But titles and achievements meant nothing in that moment. What mattered was that I'd grown up watching my grandmother clean office buildings at night, teaching me that real power isn't about authority. It's about understanding people, respecting their worth, and never forgetting where you came from. So when Constance Hartwell demanded I hand over all company property, I did exactly that. I removed my security badge from the lanyard around my neck, placed it on the polished mahogany table, and slid it toward her. The small plastic card made a soft scraping sound that seemed impossibly loud in the silent room. Then I asked the question that changed everything. "Before I go, I'm curious about something. Why did the web domain titles, all 4 of them, go to my personal business account instead of the company registry?" 3 months earlier, everything had been different. Hartwell Digital Solutions occupied the 11th and 12th floors of the Meridian Tower downtown. Glass walls, ergonomic furniture, and a coffee bar that served nitro cold brew on tap. Wesley Hartwell had inherited the company from his father, along with a trust fund and an MBA from a school that valued his family's donation history more than his academic performance. I'd joined HDS 4 years prior as a junior strategist. Back then, the company had 17 employees and a reputation for decent work at premium prices. Nothing spectacular, but solid. I'd worked my way up by doing what I'd always done, outworking everyone else, anticipating problems before they became disasters, and treating every client like they were my only priority. By the time I made director, we'd grown to 63 employees across 3 departments. I'd personally built the digital division from the ground up, hiring specialists in SEO, content strategy, and conversion optimization. My team was responsible for roughly 70% of the company's revenue, though Wesley loved to take credit during board meetings with his mother and the family investors. Constance Hartwell had been a presence from day one, though never officially on the payroll. She'd show up for important client presentations, sit in on strategy sessions she wasn't invited to, and send Wesley lengthy emails about decisions that were well above her understanding of digital marketing. He'd forward them to me with messages like "thoughts" or "can you handle this?" which I interpreted correctly as "make my mother think she's right while doing what actually works." I'd managed this delicate balance for years. When Constance suggested we pursue print advertising for a client's e-commerce business, I'd create mock-ups knowing they'd never be used while implementing a robust social media campaign. When she insisted we needed more synergy, without defining what that meant, I'd schedule team-building sessions and send her photos while my actual team continued working on deliverables. The arrangement was exhausting but functional. Wesley got to keep his mother happy, Constance got to feel important, and I got to run my division without interference. Everyone won. Or so I thought. The first crack in this foundation appeared in July. Wesley called me into his office on a Friday afternoon, which was already unusual. He typically left by 2 on Fridays for golf at his country club. His desk was unusually cluttered with papers, and he had the distracted air of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. "Amara, I need a favor," he started, already leaning back in his chair with the posture of someone who expected automatic agreement. "Mother wants to rebrand the company. New logo, new website, new everything. She's got some ideas about making us more, what did she call it? Aspirational." I kept my expression neutral. "We rebranded 18 months ago. The current identity is performing well across all metrics. Client surveys specifically mention the website's usability as a factor in choosing us over competitors." Wesley waved this away like he was swatting a fly. I know, but she's convinced we need something fresher, more high-end. She showed me some examples, lots of gold accents, serif fonts, that kind of thing. Everything Constance had shown him would make us look like a luxury hotel from 1987, but I didn't say that. Instead, I pulled out my tablet and made notes. When is she hoping to implement this? That's the thing. Wesley had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. She wants it done by September. Full rollout. New domains, new marketing materials, new everything. And she wants to be involved in every decision. 2 months. A complete rebrand in 2 months, with Constance micromanaging every choice. I'd done impossible projects before, but this was different. This was deliberately setting me up to fail so she could swoop in and blame me when her terrible ideas crashed and burned. "I'll need budget approval," I said carefully. "A project this scope requires external resources, design agency, web development, domain acquisition, content migration." "Already approved," Wesley interrupted. "Whatever you need. Mother's actually funding it personally as an investment in the company's future. Just keep her in the loop and make it happen." Red flags were waving so vigorously they could have generated wind power, but I nodded. "I'll put together a project timeline and share it with both of you by Monday." That weekend, I didn't relax. Instead, I sat at my apartment with my laptop and 3 legal pads, mapping out exactly what Constance was trying to do. She wanted control of the company's digital identity, the one thing I'd built that Wesley couldn't claim credit for. If she funded the rebrand personally and involved herself in every decision, she could position herself as the visionary who elevated the company, diminishing my role and Wesley's ownership simultaneously. But there was something else, something that nagged at me. Why now? What had changed? The answer came from an unexpected source. Bethany Rodriguez had been my senior content strategist for 2 years, brilliant, thorough, and blessed with the kind of nosiness that made her exceptional at research. She knocked on my office door the following Tuesday morning with her laptop and an expression that meant she'd found something. "Close the door," she said, which was never a good sign. I did, and she immediately opened her laptop, turning it so I could see the screen. It displayed a business filing document from the state registry, dated 6 weeks earlier. Hartwell Holdings, LLC, a new entity, registered to Constance Hartwell's address, with articles of incorporation that described its purpose as digital marketing services and brand consultation. "She's starting a competing company," I said flatly. "Not just that." Bethany clicked to another tab. "I found a job posting from 3 weeks ago. Same description as our services, same client industries we target, even some of the same language from our website. It was taken down after 2 days, but I found the cached version." My mind was already racing ahead. She's planning to spin off, use Wesley's client list, use our methods, and create her own company she actually controls. That's what it looks like. And if she funds and directs a rebrand here first, she gets to learn all the new strategies and systems before she launches her own thing. Basically, we'd be training her to compete against us. Bethany's expression was grim. "I wasn't sure if I should bring this to you or Wesley first." "You made the right choice," I thought for a moment. "Don't mention this to anyone else. Let me handle it." After Bethany left, I sat in my office staring at the skyline, weighing my options. I could go to Wesley, but he'd never believe his mother was planning to undercut him. He'd rationalize it, make excuses, or worst case, tell Constance I was onto her scheme. I could refuse the rebrand project, but that would give her ammunition to paint me as difficult or uncommitted. Or I could do something else entirely. I pulled up my personal business registration, Sinclair Strategy Consulting, an LLC I'd established 3 years ago for occasional freelance work and speaking engagements. It was legitimate, properly maintained, and completely separate from Hartwell Digital Solutions. My employment contract allowed outside consulting as long as it didn't compete with HDS or use company resources. Then I started making phone calls. By the end of the week, I'd assembled a team of external contractors I'd worked with for years. Designers, developers, copywriters, all people who'd collaborated with me on HDS projects but were independent professionals. I presented the rebrand plan to Wesley and Constance the following Monday, outlining a timeline, deliverables, and budget. Everything looked exactly like what they'd requested. What I didn't mention was how I'd structured the contracts. The design agency would create the assets, but the licensing agreement specified they were created for Sinclair Strategy, consulting on behalf of Hartwell Digital Solutions. The web development contract included a clause that maintenance and hosting would be managed through my LLC. And the domain registrations, all 4 of them, including the new primary domain and 3 alternatives for different campaign purposes, would be purchased and held by my business entity, then licensed to HDS. This wasn't unusual in the industry. Many companies used third-party managers for digital assets. It reduced overhead and provided specialized expertise. The contracts included terms that HDS could purchase the domains at cost at any point, or I'd maintain them as part of an ongoing service agreement. Everything was legal, documented, and actually beneficial for Hartwell Digital Solutions. But it also meant I held the keys to their entire online presence. Constance, predictably, hated every design choice I presented and loved every terrible idea she suggested. I sat through 17 revision meetings where she demanded changes that contradicted established branding principles, user experience research, and basic aesthetic sense. Wesley attended exactly 2 of these meetings before finding excuses to be elsewhere, leaving me alone with his mother and her vision of what she called sophisticated luxury. I implemented about 30% of her requests, enough to make her feel heard, while carefully maintaining functionality and not completely destroying the brand's credibility. The rest I gently redirected with phrases like industry best practices suggest and our target demographic research indicates, backing everything with data she didn't bother to read. By mid-September, we launched the new brand identity. It wasn't my best work. Constance's influence had watered down some of the stronger concepts, but it was functional, professional, and represented a clear evolution from the previous version. Client feedback was generally positive, with a few noting it felt more corporate than before, which I privately agreed with. Constance, however, acted like she'd personally painted the Sistine Chapel. She scheduled a launch event at an expensive downtown venue, invited clients and industry contacts, and gave a speech about her vision for bringing Hartwell Digital Solutions into a new era of excellence. Wesley stood beside her looking vaguely embarrassed, while I remained in the background with my team, watching this woman take credit for months of our work. The really galling part was hearing her explain design choices she'd actively opposed, now presenting them as her ideas. The color palette she'd called too bold, now it was a daring choice that reflected our innovative spirit. The simplified navigation she'd wanted to clutter with drop-down menus. A streamlined approach that prioritized user experience. Bethany stood next to me, watching with barely concealed disgust. How are you not losing your mind right now? Professional development, I murmured back, learning patience and strategic thinking. What I didn't say was that I was also watching Constance network with every major client in the room, collecting business cards, and making comments about future collaborations. She was hunting, gathering intelligence and contacts for her own venture. The rebrand had been exactly what I'd suspected. A training exercise before she launched Hartwell Holdings into direct competition with her son's company. I waited another month before confirming my suspicions. In October, Bethany's carefully maintained Google alerts caught a new website launch, Hartwell Holdings, offering premium digital marketing services with an emphasis on sophisticated brand elevation. The services list was nearly identical to ours. Several of the team photos showed people I recognized from industry events, some of whom I'd personally introduced to Constance. She'd even copied elements from the rebrand we'd just completed, not exactly, which would be legally actionable, but close enough that anyone familiar with our work would see the resemblance. The color palette was shifted slightly warmer, the fonts were different families but similar weights, the overall aesthetic was clearly derivative. And she was offering services at rates 20% below our pricing. That's when I knew the other shoe was about to drop. Constance wasn't just building a competitor, she was planning to cannibalize Hartwell Digital Solutions entirely. Why wouldn't she? If she could poach the major clients, hire away key staff with promises of ground floor opportunities, and leverage the Hartwell family name, she'd have a company she controlled completely instead of one where she had to work through her son. Wesley would be left with a gutted client list, a demoralized team, and no mother to buffer his incompetence. I'd almost feel sorry for him if he hadn't enabled her for so long. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Thursday. The subject line said Team Update and Strategic Planning, which was corporate speak for something's happening and we're going to pretend it's good news. I arrived 5 minutes early to find the large conference room already set up with glasses of water at each seat, the projector humming, and an atmosphere that felt like the calm before a hurricane. My team filtered in looking confused. This meeting hadn't been on anyone's calendar that morning. Wesley arrived precisely at 2, followed immediately by Constance, who wasn't supposed to be there at all. She was dressed like she was going to a board meeting at a Fortune 500 company, navy suit, pearls, her signature Hermes scarf. Wesley looked like he'd rather be literally anywhere else, his tie slightly crooked, and his eyes not meeting anyone's directly. "Thank you all for being flexible with your schedules," Wesley started, which was hilarious given we'd had about 90 minutes notice. "I've asked my mother to join us because we're announcing some exciting changes to the company structure." Bethany's hand found mine under the table and squeezed. She knew, we both knew. Wesley continued with a prepared speech about new directions and streamlining operations and focusing on core competencies, which were all euphemisms for cuts. The digital division, my division, was being restructured. Several positions were being eliminated. Others were being moved under different management reporting structures. He didn't say my name, but Constance's eyes were locked on me the entire time, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Then she stood up, smoothing her skirt with deliberate calm. "I want to add," she said, her voice carrying that particular upper-class clip that made everything sound like a pronouncement from on high, "that these changes reflect a need for more experienced leadership in our digital operations. Wesley and I have decided that the director position will be filled by someone with a more traditional marketing background, someone who understands that good marketing is timeless, not just trendy." My entire team was staring at Wesley, who was suddenly fascinated by his notes. He wouldn't even look up. "Amara, we appreciate your contributions," Constance continued, and the false sweetness in her voice made my jaw clench. "But we've decided to go in a different direction. Effective immediately, your employment with Hartwell Digital Solutions is terminated. We'll need you to hand over all company property, credentials, and access before you leave today." The room erupted. Bethany actually stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. 2 of my senior strategists started talking at once, their voices overlapping in protest. Jackson, my SEO specialist, was staring at Wesley with open contempt. "Shut up and hand over all company property." Constance's voice cut through the chaos like a blade, shockingly loud and sharp. The room fell silent instantly. She was glaring at me specifically, her composure cracked enough to show the anger underneath. "Your badge, your laptop, your access cards, all of it. Right now. You have no authority here anymore, and I will not tolerate disruption from a disgruntled former employee. Every single person in that room was watching me. Some looked angry on my behalf, some looked scared for their own positions, some just looked shocked. Wesley had finally looked up but seemed frozen, incapable of intervening even if he'd wanted to. This was the moment. This was where Constance expected me to break down, to argue, to storm out, to give her a scene she could point to later as evidence of my unprofessionalism. This was her victory lap, firing me in front of my entire team to establish dominance and make it clear that her vision was the only one that mattered. I reached up slowly and removed my security badge from its lanyard. The photo was from 3 years ago, taken during an office event where I'd been laughing at something Bethany said. I looked young in it, optimistic, still believing that hard work and results mattered more than politics and power plays. I placed the badge on the table and slid it across the polished surface toward Constance. It came to rest about a foot from her hand. Then I asked the question I'd been preparing for weeks. Before I go, I'm curious about something. My voice was calm, almost conversational. Why did the web domain titles, all 4 of them, go to my personal business account instead of the company registry? The smile disappeared from Constance's face. Wesley's head snapped up, his expression confused. Around the table, my team members were equally puzzled, not understanding what I meant. The rebrand you funded, I continued, keeping my tone pleasant and professional. The new website, the new domains, all the digital infrastructure. The registration and licensing agreements specify that those assets are held by Sinclair Strategy Consulting and licensed to Hartwell Digital Solutions under a service agreement. That agreement includes a clause stating that if I'm terminated without cause, the licensing terms need to be renegotiated. Understanding was dawning on Wesley's face, followed quickly by panic. Constance had gone very still, her hands clenched on the table. What this means practically, I said, addressing the room but watching Constance, is that the website currently running, the one with all your client portals, your contact forms, your service descriptions, your case studies, is hosted on infrastructure I control. The domain names that clients use to find you, that are on all your new business cards and marketing materials, are registered to my company. Wesley found his voice. That can't be legal, you can't just. It's completely legal, I interrupted gently. In fact, it's standard practice for digital asset management. The contracts were reviewed and approved by your legal team 3 months ago. Your mother signed off on them personally, remember. She wanted to be involved in every decision. Constance's face had gone from pale to flushed. This is blackmail. You deliberately structured this to protect my work and ensure proper compensation for services rendered, I finished. The contracts are very clear. As long as I'm employed by HDS or we maintain the licensing agreement, everything continues normally. But if my employment is terminated, the terms change. Standard business practice. Bethany was fighting to keep a smile off her face. Jackson had his hand over his mouth, but his eyes were bright with barely suppressed laughter. The rest of the team was looking between me and Constance like they were watching a tennis match. You can't hold the company hostage, Constance said, her voice shaking with rage. We'll sue you for. For what? Honoring the contracts your son's company signed? Maintaining my legal business interests? I tilted my head slightly. Those contracts include early termination clauses. HDS can purchase the domains and all associated assets at cost. That's about $8,000 for registration, development, and setup. Or we can continue the licensing arrangement, which costs $500 monthly. Both options are well below market rate, which any court would recognize as extremely favorable to the company. Wesley was frantically flipping through papers, probably trying to find the original contracts. He wouldn't find them there. They were filed properly with the legal department, but he'd never actually read them. He just signed what I put in front of him, trusting that I was handling the details. There's a third option, I continued. You could rebuild everything from scratch. New domains, though good luck finding ones as good as what you have now, those took weeks to secure. New website, which will take months to develop and optimize for search engines. New hosting infrastructure. New email systems. And during all that time, your current web presence goes dark, or at best, displays a message that you're undergoing updates. I let that sink in for a moment before adding, I pulled the analytics this morning. Your website gets about 47,000 unique visitors monthly. Approximately 18% of your new business inquiries come through the web contact form. That's roughly 26 leads per month, with a conversion rate of about 30%. 8 new clients monthly. Your average contract value is $65,000. Bethany knew exactly where I was going with this and jumped in smoothly. That's $520,000 in monthly revenue tied directly to web presence, times 3 months minimum to rebuild properly. About $1.6 million in potential lost business. I nodded my thanks to her. So your options are $8,000 to purchase assets you already funded, $500 monthly to maintain our current agreement, or $1.6 million in lost revenue while you rebuild, plus legal fees if you want to sue me for honoring contracts your company signed. The room was utterly silent. Wesley looked like he might throw up. Constance was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. Of course, I said, standing up and gathering my personal tablet and coffee mug, there's a fourth option. You could reconsider this termination, we could discuss what different direction actually means for the company, and we could have an honest conversation about leadership and decision-making. I wasn't even sure I wanted that option. Being fired by Constance in front of my team had pretty thoroughly burned that bridge, but I wanted to offer it. I wanted everyone in that room to see that I was being reasonable, professional, and fair while Constance had been vindictive and short-sighted. Wesley opened his mouth, probably to accept that fourth option, but Constance cut him off. Absolutely not. We will not be blackmailed by an employee who deliberately sabotaged company assets to leverage herself into. I structured the contracts exactly as industry standards recommend, I said, my voice hardening slightly. I protected both my intellectual property and the company's interests. If you interpreted that as sabotage, perhaps you should reconsider why you're making decisions about a division you don't understand. Get out, Constance hissed. Get out of this building right now, or I'll have security remove you. I nodded slowly. All right, I'll expect contact from your legal team about which option you'd like to pursue regarding the digital assets. Until then, the licensing agreement remains in effect at the monthly rate. Payments due on the 1st. I walked toward the door, and then Bethany stood up. I quit, she said clearly, looking directly at Wesley, not Constance. Effective immediately. I'll stay on for 2 weeks if Amara's consulting company wants to hire me to help with the transition, but I'm done here. Jackson stood next. Same, I'm out. One by one, 7 members of my 12-person team stood up and walked toward the door. Not everyone. Some had mortgages or families or circumstances that made job security more important than loyalty. I understood completely, and I made eye contact with each person who stayed, trying to convey that I held no grudge. But more than half my team followed me out of that conference room, walking past Constance's furious face and Wesley's slack-jawed shock, leaving behind their badges and laptops, and the company that had just demonstrated exactly how little it valued them. We gathered in the lobby, and I felt the weight of what had just happened settling onto my shoulders. 7 people had just quit their jobs because I'd made a play I hadn't even been certain would work. 7 people were now looking to me to have a plan. Sinclair Strategy Consulting is hiring, I said, meeting each person's eyes. Same roles, same work, better environment. I can't match your exact salaries immediately, but I can offer equity and profit sharing. You'd be building something from the ground up, which is risky, but you'd also be owners, not employees. When do we start? Bethany asked, and there was no hesitation in her voice. Monday, I said. I'll send contracts this weekend. We exchanged contact information, hugged, and dispersed. I took the elevator down to the parking garage alone, my box of personal items from my office tucked under one arm. The security team had been surprisingly efficient about packing it up. They must have been briefed ahead of time that I was being terminated. My phone was already ringing before I reached my car. The first call was from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. The second was from Wesley, which I also ignored. The third was from a law firm I actually recognized. They'd done contract work for HDS in the past. I answered that one. Miss Sinclair, this is Timothy Oakes from Brennan and Associates. I've been retained by Hartwell Digital Solutions to discuss the matter of certain domain registrations and licensing agreements. I'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss terms. Mr. Oakes, I appreciate the call. I'm available to discuss this matter with proper legal representation present. I'll have my attorney contact you to schedule something next week. I was already mentally going through the lawyers I knew who specialized in contract and intellectual property law. Miss Sinclair, my clients are anxious to resolve this quickly. Perhaps we could. Next week, I repeated firmly. Have a good evening. I hung up and sat in my car for a long moment, processing everything that had just happened. I'd been fired. I'd burned bridges with a major company in my industry. I'd convinced 7 people to quit their jobs. I was potentially heading into a legal battle that could drain my savings. And I felt absolutely fantastic. My phone rang again, Wesley naturally. This time I answered. Amara, please, we need to talk about this. He started immediately, his voice strained. My mother overreacted. We can work something out. Your mother fired me in front of my entire team and demanded I hand over company property like I was a criminal, I said calmly. There's no walking that back, Wesley. She made her decision. But the website, the domains, we need those. You can't just... I'm not just doing anything. I'm honoring the contracts your company signed. You have 3 options for moving forward, and my attorney will discuss them with yours. This is business now, not employment. Amara, please. He sounded genuinely desperate, and part of me, the part that had worked with him for 4 years, almost felt bad. Almost. You let your mother walk all over you and this company for years, I said. You let her take credit for other people's work, interfere with operations she didn't understand, and treat your employees like servants. You enabled every bit of this, Wesley. And when she decided to fire me to clear the way for whatever she's planning, you sat there and let it happen. You don't get to call me now and ask for favors. What do you mean, whatever she's planning? I almost laughed. You really don't know? Check the business registry for Hartwell Holdings, LLC. Look at the services they offer and the clients they're targeting. Your mother isn't just interfering with your company, Wesley. She's building her own to compete with you. The rebrand, the involvement in operations, all of it, she was learning your business model to copy it. The silence on the other end was profound. Have your lawyer call mine, I said, and ended the call. The weekend was a blur of contract drafting, business planning, and legal consultations. My attorney, Catherine Wu, was a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in exactly this kind of corporate warfare. She reviewed my contracts with HDS, declared them beautifully airtight, and prepared for negotiations with Brennan and Associates. They're going to try to claim you acted in bad faith, Catherine said during our Sunday morning meeting at a coffee shop near her office. They'll argue you deliberately structured the agreements to create leverage for exactly this situation. And our response, I asked, sipping coffee that was too hot and too necessary. That you structured them according to industry standards, that every term was disclosed and agreed to, and that HDS benefited from below-market rates on both the purchase option and the licensing fees. Any claim of bad faith requires proving deception or hidden terms. Everything was transparent. They just didn't bother to read what they signed. Catherine smiled, and it was the expression of someone who genuinely enjoyed her job. Plus, we have evidence that Constance Hartwell was planning to compete with HDS using knowledge and access gained through her involvement in their operations. If they push too hard, we can introduce that into proceedings and make things very uncomfortable for her. I'd rather not, I said honestly. My goal isn't to destroy them. I just want fair compensation for my work and to move forward with my own business. That's laudable, but keep it as an option. They need to know you're not defenseless. Catherine made notes on her tablet. What are you hoping to get out of negotiations? I'd thought about this extensively. Ideally, they purchase the domains and assets at cost, $8,000. Clean break, no ongoing relationship. They get what they need to operate, I get compensated fairly, everyone moves on. And if they refuse? Then we maintain the licensing agreement at $500 monthly until they decide to buy out or rebuild. Either way, I'm compensated for the assets I developed. What about your non-compete? Catherine asked, flipping through documents. Doesn't apply. It specifies I can't work for direct competitors or solicit HDS clients for 2 years. I'm not doing either. Sinclair Strategy Consulting existed before this situation, and I'm not reaching out to their clients. If clients come to me independently, that's different, but I'm not soliciting. Catherine nodded approvingly. Good, keep it that way. Don't contact any HDS clients, don't disparage the company publicly, and document everything. If they want to fight, we'll give them one, but we're going to be absolutely unimpeachable in our conduct. The meeting with Brennan and Associates was scheduled for Tuesday afternoon. I wore my most professional suit, carried a folder with every relevant document, and walked into their conference room with Catherine beside me and my head held high. Timothy Oakes was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 40s, with the kind of polished appearance that came from expensive haircuts and tailored suits. With him was an associate and, surprisingly, Wesley. No Constance, which was interesting. Thank you for meeting with us, Timothy began, shaking hands with professional courtesy. I think we can resolve this situation efficiently if we approach it reasonably. We're certainly here for that, Catherine responded smoothly. What followed was 90 minutes of careful legal negotiation. Timothy argued that the contracts, while technically legal, violated the spirit of the employment relationship. Catherine countered that the contracts were standard, beneficial to HDS, and explicitly approved by their legal team and Constance herself. Timothy suggested that my termination was for cause, failure to adequately lead my division. Catherine pulled out performance reviews, client testimonials, and revenue reports showing my division had exceeded targets for 12 consecutive quarters. Timothy tried to claim the domain registrations were company property regardless of registration. Catherine cited contract law and pointed out that HDS had explicitly agreed to the licensing arrangement, and changing terms retroactively wasn't legal. Through all of this, Wesley sat looking progressively more uncomfortable, occasionally interjecting with questions that made it clear he was only now understanding the full scope of what had happened. Finally, Timothy leaned back and said, "What outcome would satisfy your client, Miss Wu?" Purchase of the digital assets at cost, $8,000, or continuation of the existing licensing agreement at $500 monthly. Those were always the terms. My client isn't changing anything. She's simply enforcing the agreement your client signed. $8,000 seems excessive for domain names. It's cost, not markup, I interjected. That's registration fees, development work, setup, and transfer fees. I'm not profiting, I'm recovering expenses. If you'd like an itemized breakdown, I can provide one. Wesley spoke up suddenly. Can I talk to Amara alone for a minute? Timothy looked alarmed. Mr. Hartwell, I'd advise against. Just 5 minutes, please. Wesley was looking directly at me, and there was something in his expression that made me nod. Catherine squeezed my hand under the table, a silent reminder to be careful, but allowed it. The lawyer stepped out, leaving Wesley and me alone in the conference room. He slumped in his chair immediately, looking exhausted. I didn't know, he said, about my mother's company, about what she was planning. I swear, Amara, I didn't know. Would it have mattered if you did? I asked, not unkindly. I want to say yes, but... He trailed off, then laughed bitterly. Probably not. I've never been able to stand up to her. My whole life, she's had this way of making me feel like everything I do is inadequate unless she approves it. The company, my decisions, all of it. I've always needed her validation. That's something you need to work through, Wesley. Therapy might help. I wasn't being sarcastic, I meant it. I know, he rubbed his face. I confronted her, about Hartwell Holdings. She admitted it, said she was diversifying the family interests, and I should be grateful she was building something else instead of wasting time fixing my mistakes. Despite everything, I felt a flicker of sympathy for him. Constance was a piece of work as a boss's mother. I couldn't imagine having her as an actual mother. I'll pay the $8,000, Wesley said abruptly. Today, wire transfer, and I want to apologize. What happened in that meeting, how she spoke to you, how I just sat there, it was wrong. You deserved better. Your team deserved better. Yes, we did, I agreed, but I appreciate you saying it. Will you consider coming back? I'll make my mother stay out of operations entirely, put it in writing, whatever you need. No, I said it gently but firmly. That bridge is burned, Wesley. You can't unring that bell. Even if I trusted you to keep her away, which I don't, my team wouldn't trust it. 7 people walked out because they saw how this company treats valuable employees. You can't fix that with promises. He nodded slowly, accepting it. What about the non-compete, if you're starting your own consultancy? Doesn't apply. Different business model, not soliciting your clients, completely separate entity. Catherine confirmed it. Right, of course. He stood up, extending his hand. For what it's worth, you were the best director I ever had. Probably will be the best I ever have. I'm sorry I couldn't be a better boss. I shook his hand. Good luck, Wesley, I mean that. The lawyers came back in, and within 30 minutes, we had a settlement agreement. HDS would purchase all digital assets for $8,000, transferred immediately. I would provide full cooperation during a transition period of 2 weeks, compensated at my previous daily rate. The non-compete was explicitly acknowledged as not applying to Sinclair Strategy Consulting. Both parties agreed to non-disparagement clauses. By Wednesday afternoon, the money was in my account, and I was officially completely free. 6 months after that conference room confrontation, I sat in my office, actually my office, in a space my company leased, with my name on the door, reviewing the Tessera project results. We delivered 2 weeks ahead of schedule. Their new digital presence had generated a 43% increase in web traffic and a 37% improvement in conversion rates. Helen Voss had sent a personal email calling it the smoothest, most professional project execution I've experienced in 20 years. Bethany knocked on my door, holding her tablet with a familiar expression that meant she'd found something interesting. You're going to want to see this, she said, turning the screen toward me. It was a business news article. The headline read, Hartwell Holdings ceases operations after 8 months. I skimmed the article. Constance had apparently burned through her initial investment without achieving profitability. Client complaints about missed deadlines and poor communication had damaged the company's reputation beyond recovery. Several employees had left citing hostile work environment. The business was being dissolved, assets liquidated. And this, Bethany added, swiping to another article. Hartwell Digital Solutions announces merger with Brennan Creative Group. Wesley was selling. Or more accurately, HDS was being absorbed by a larger agency, with Wesley staying on in an advisory role, which was corporate speak for a golden parachute and minimal actual responsibility. How do you feel about it? Bethany asked, watching my face. Honestly, I thought about it. Relieved that I got out when I did. Sorry that it ended badly for people who didn't deserve it. Grateful that we're here instead of there. No schadenfreude, not even a little. Maybe a little, I admitted with a small smile. But mostly I'm just focused on what we're building. Constance and Wesley made their choices. We made ours. I like our outcomes better. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Client meeting in 30 minutes, a new prospect, referred by Tessera, looking for comprehensive brand development. The kind of project that excited me, that challenged my team, that we'd execute brilliantly because we were invested in the work, not just the paycheck. Ready? Bethany asked, gathering her materials. Always, I said and meant it. The corporate world has its rules, its hierarchies, its power plays. People like Constance believe they can manipulate those systems forever, that authority and money make them untouchable. People like Wesley enable them, choosing comfort over courage. But sometimes, someone who's been underestimated, dismissed, or pushed aside decides to play a different game entirely. Not revenge exactly, just consequences, just accountability. Just standing up and saying, no, I'm worth more than this, and being prepared to prove it. I'd walked into that conference room as an employee who could be fired and discarded. I'd walked out as a business owner who controlled assets they needed. The difference wasn't just legal contracts or domain registrations. The difference was knowing my value and refusing to accept less. That's not revenge, that's just good business. And if you're building something similar, standing up to workplace injustice, documenting everything, and preparing for the moment when you might need leverage. The subscribe button below means you'll catch every story we share. We're building toward 8,000 subscribers, and this community represents everyone who believes that professional excellence and personal dignity aren't mutually exclusive. Hit that notification bell, and you'll know the moment new stories go live. The Payback Office channel isn't about petty vindication. It's about accountability, strategy, and the satisfaction of watching careful preparation meet opportunity. It's about knowing that sometimes the best revenge is building something better than what tried to break you. Welcome to the community. I think you'll fit right in.